Welcome back to ORKTOBER. It is I, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. We're picking back up in Chapter 3 of War Boss by Mike Brooks. Let's see what happened to Squiggy and his little band of Grots. Remember what's happened? They were fighting, they were tussling, and the head of the Mega Gargant has been released and fallen all the way down and landed on the War Boss. For just a moment, General Erzbrog thought that the enormous visage of Gork, or possibly Mork, falling off the Mega Gargant was something that Gazrot Gorsnappa had orchestrated. He was still waiting for Squigga's head to appear in its place, and the Snack Bitten to announce he'd created the galaxies for Squigdread, or something equally ridiculous, when he realized that Gazrot's expression as he looked upwards at the massive hunk of falling metal was not one of triumph or pride, but one of confusion, rapidly overtaken by one of comprehension. The general had done enough yelling back and forth in a loud war zones to have picked up an understanding of what shapes an orc's mouth made when forming certain words. And so he was quite certain that he did not imagine that Gazrot said, "Oh, Zog," just before the Gargant's head landed on top of him. Fire blossomed upwards, accompanied by rolling clouds of black smoke. Shards of metal were flung out, scything through the ranks and cutting down the ones in front. Mainly lower-ranking boys, since any boss with half a brain kept a few footloggers between him and the Gazrot Gorsnappa, just in case the Snack-Bitten decided he needed to make an example of someone. A lot of orcs cheered on General Principal, since something loud and destructive had happened, and that was always worth cheering. General Erzbrog's brows lowered, and not just because he was squinting against the cloud of dust and dirt blasted outwards by the impact. The presence of the war boss was the lodestone to which the rest of the Wah was inexorably drawn. An invisible force, sort of like gravity, only not one the mech boys could duplicate with a truck full of spare parts, a free afternoon, and a plentiful supply of fungus beer. And now, in some way, that Erzbrog could not quite verbalize, even within his own head, that pool was gone. Well, not gone exactly. It was more inward. "You killed him!" Cruffink said, his tone one of bleak and utter dread. "You killed the war boss, Snaggi." Snaggy's first instinct was to deny it. That was what Grot did. If something happened, then you denied it, unless you were absolutely sure that the biggest orc paying attention was happy with it, in which case he claimed the credit for it. He should deny that the lever had moved, and if it had definitely moved, then he should deny being the one to have pulled on it. And if it was impossible to argue that he hadn't been the one who pulled on it, then he should definitely blame Cruffink for hitting him so hard that he had no option other than to grab the lever. No, better, that he hadn't even realized that he grabbed the lever. But he didn't feel like denying it. He could hear the great green voices of the gods, and the gods were telling him that he shouldn't try to hide this. Who could say they'd killed the war boss? Precious few. There were mighty beakies who'd never killed a war boss. There were flashy scrawnies who'd never killed a war boss. There were stompy metal gits with the glowy guns who'd never killed a war boss. So, what if Snaggi couldn't actually prove that pulling on the lever was what had caused the Gargant's head to fall off? So what if it made no sense for Mech Zogbluts to set up a lever that would make the head of his pride and joy fall off? Maybe the mech hadn't done it on purpose? Maybe he'd made a mistake? Perhaps this wasn't Snaggy's destiny. Do you like that? Yeah, he said, tasting the word as it passed his needle teeth, relishing the thrill of danger as he admitted no claimed credit for killing Garzot Gorsnappa. Yeah, I did. I killed the war boss. And you know what? He continued, warming to the rebellious glow in his chest. You know Zoggin what? He rounded on Cruffink and grabbed the horrified Grot by the front of his rags. I ain't finished. I've had it with being kicked for things I ain't done, or even things I have. I've had it with being yelled at and fighting the squigs for me food. There's more of us down there than there are of them. It's time for us Grots to rise up. You hear me? We're gonna show these overgrown gits who the real war bosses are, eh? And any of them don't like it? He smacked the back of one hand palm to the other. Bam! They're gonna get flattened. Just like that git down there. This is just the beginning. This is the revolution. Far below, the orcs of what had up until very recently been Wah! Gazrot weren't paying any attention to the tiny animated figure screaming far above them. They had suddenly acquired much more pressing concerns. Let me know if you want me to read chapter 4 next week as we continue with ORKTOBER. Otherwise, my husband will find another selection for me to read. Dakka, Dakka, Dakka! Happy ORKTOBER!